Jeffrey Dahmer soaked in blood. The Unabomber blowing up. Waco, Texas, and Heaven's Gates. Aliens modified, meant for apes. JFK shot in the head by the CIA. Bigfoot and the Mothman. Son of Sam talking to dogs again. Witches, ghosts, and goblins. Mysterious noise and hauntings. Dark arts in the skull and bones. Most celebrities are probably cloned. So if you're feeling all alone, crack a beer and get stoned. I welcome you to the podcast Strange Brew. We're here to entertain you. We're here to entertain you.
It's about to get strange.
Welcome everybody back to the show. Yeah, the intro is always a weird thing for people. They either like it or they hate it. Welcome back everybody to the show. I am Tomcat, aka Tom Thompson, the Reptilian. You can find all my music on all music platforms. We are back with another episode of Strange Brew Podcast. I am very excited for this one. I have a fascinating guest that I've listened to and just started subscribing to your YouTube channel. It's pretty exciting. You've been unlocking and trying to solve things that are going on within the shadow government I saw recently, which is pretty exciting. So can you let the audience know who you are and where to find you?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Elizabeth April. I am 32. And yeah, I mean, if you're interested in everything I do, you just type in Elizabeth April and you'll find me on all the platforms. So my main thing, right, because it's really hard to sort of label what I do or who I am. But recently I've really just resonated with remote viewer. So
Yeah.
I'm a very curious person. And a very long time ago, I learned how to remote view, which is essentially just the process of getting into a trance-like state, removing your focus or your conscious present moment from your body, and then really just focused on whatever it is that you're interested in, and then you end up going to that place. So when I started to remote view, I was very anti-establishment, still am, but very sort of like, fuck the government, like what's really going on. And this is where I sort of stumbled across a lot of military bases and cloning facilities and reptilians. And I started to sort of unravel and unpack what was going on planet Earth. And then, of course, one of my favorite places to remote view these days is off planet. The planet can be pretty boring. There's a lot of shit going on, but there's also even more interesting stuff going on in other places in the universe. And specifically with remote viewing, what's really cool is you can go into other dimensional realms as well. So I'm able to remote view into, say, the 8th dimension and see what's going on there. So that's sort of what I do. I just sort of let my curiosity take me wherever it is I want to go. So
yeah. Can I ask you something? Can you just double check if your mic is connected so you can just go into settings, like this will be cut out. Then it is connected?
Let's just take a look. I checked all of the settings.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, you're right.
It's all good. Editing is fine.
Perfect.
There you go.
Is
That's here.
that better?
Oh yeah, way better. There we go. Awesome.
It was connected to my Beats.
It's all good. It's all good. Mistakes happen. That's why we don't go live all the time.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff because I've been interested in aliens. My first love was always the paranormal. I messed around with Ouija boards when I was really young, like 12, 11, and didn't know what I was talking to. God knows what. I have no idea. My friends would just do it for fun, but I've always been really interested. And I did a lot of research. Obviously, I discovered David Icke when I was fairly young, like 16, I think. And then that kind of led me down a rabbit hole. And I started researching, and especially in my co-hosts and stuff know this, that I'm like fascinated by the reptilian stuff. I've had a shadow person experience where it literally felt like my soul was getting sucked out of my body. I saw an 8-foot tall shadow creature look down at me. It was extremely terrifying, probably one of the most terrifying experiences I've had in my life. So I kind of wanted just to ask you, like, when did this get started? Like, I know because I've listened to some of your stuff, but I want you to kind of tell the audience, like, how did you start down this journey?
Yeah, for sure. So, in this lifetime, I was born with extrasensory abilities, which essentially just means I was more in tune to other people's emotions. I could visually see auras and different colors. I think it's called synesthesia as well, where even to this day, if my eyes are closed and there's a loud sound, I can see the sound. So, there's a little bit of that as well.
Interesting.
And so, I was a very sort of anxious kid who had, a quote unquote really wide imagination. I was seeing ghosts and spirits at a very young age as well. And so my parents told me that around the age of 2, they realized that I was, seeing things that they couldn't see, especially compared to my older brother. So that's sort of
Interesting.
when it began. I'm definitely not some sort of generational psychic. Like, I've never been trained in anything that I do, not the remote viewing, mediumship, past life regression. Everything that I know how to do is self taught, which is definitely a blessing and a curse. But I do believe, because I've been able to guide myself, that anyone has the ability to get to where I am. I've always said that one day I hope to be out of a job. I hope that one day, everyone finds that ability to tap in themselves. And so I don't have to be the conduit of information, because everyone's gaining access to the information themselves.
Do you think that it's possible to access these realms with the use of psychedelics? Because I've used mushrooms many times, and I'm going to have a soldier that was he's ex-soldier that used essentially DMT to help his mental health and his PTSD. And I've seen things when I've been on mushrooms, and I've done pretty high doses and heard things that you could never explain to someone the experience that you had during those times. I was just wondering what you think about that, and if you've ever tried any type of psychedelic.
Yeah, for sure. So I definitely believe that the use of psychedelics or plant medicines allow us to tap into those other realms, those other layers.
Mhm.
And really, at a scientific level, if anyone's ever seen the spirit molecule, right, it's really just stimulating dimethyltryptamine or DMT in our pineal gland. And that allows us to essentially access those other places. And remember that DMT is released when we sleep, when we're in
Yeah,
REM, and it's also released when we're born and when we die. So it's something that's so innate within us and in nature. And so I do believe that psychedelics can get us there. And I have done them myself and explored. I always wanted to do ayahuasca. At this point in my life, I'm like, do I really want to
I
push those
know.
boundaries?
I know.
Because I'm already sort of in that world most of the time. But I will
Yeah.
say that back when I was in university, I met a chemist, and he was making DMT or dimethyltryptamine. And so back when no one was ever talking about it, I ended up getting a quantity of this, and they called me the modern day shaman back in university, because I would blast people off, which is what we used to call it,
That's hilarious.
and basically administer dimethyltryptamine and take people through these experiences. So I do believe that it can help us gain access to those other realms. However, just the other day, I was in Toronto, and they have these mushroom shops everywhere, these magic mushroom shops. And it was so mind blowing to me that it's legal, it's everywhere. Like, I just never seen it. So I went in, and they were selling DMT pens. So just like a vape pen,
Yeah.
right? Of like weed, they're selling these DMT pens. And I have really deeply mixed feelings about this, because, part of me is like, fantastic. Like, anyone has access to this really sacred experience, but also at the same time, it's a very deeply sacred, even life changing experience. And should we be just smoking it out of a vape pen thinking, what a great way to get high, when it's really shouldn't be utilized like that? So it's almost like it's getting so modern that the ceremony aspect of it is really deteriorating, and that can really create some damage, some actual soul spiritual damage, if someone has that sort of experience without really knowing what they're getting into. So
Oh, I
um
100% agree. I'm
yeah.
unfortunately from Canada, so we they're
Whereabouts?
actually about an hour and a half away from Toronto. So
What
um
city?
near a terrible city called Brantford. Why? Where are you? You're not
uh
Canadian, are you?
yeah.
What? I didn't know that.
Pour some maple syrup on it and call it a day.
What? That's great. I actually didn't know that. I thought you were
Dude,
American.
I was born and raised in Kitchener-Waterloo.
Whoa, that's crazy. You're not far from me at all. That's great.
Yeah.
And you still live here in this terrible country?
No, I don't. Well, okay, I do and I don't. We
Yeah.
my wife and I bought like a 10-acre off-grid property in Ontario, about 2 hours away from Toronto, like sort of the other way.
Yeah.
So and then we live in Nevada half the time. So we're in Nevada right now. So yeah, but then I lived in LA for a while. So I've been around, but definitely Canadian at heart. That's why I'm so nice.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully this country changes a bit, but
Hopefully.
the DMT thing is interesting because that's what I was talking about with this veteran is that he's like, you know, he sent me a site where you can get a pen, I can get a pen and it's legit. And he's like, I trust this brand, but he was like, don't go into this without knowing what you're doing. So he's been reading all these CIA documents about how to use it properly and stuff like that. And then other stuff he's been looking into about what you should be doing in their experiments that they've done. And he's like, it's hard to get out of that realm once you're in there. And he's like, he's going in and often and try to learn things from that realm of where you go, wherever that is. And I think that even with mushrooms, that people, it's not a party drug. It's actually meant to heal you and help you. And I think that's what people should be using it for. Also, do you think Trudeau is a reptilian? Because I'm like pretty sure that guy is not from here.
Yeah, for sure. I've never actually remote viewed him, but
Yeah, I
I
wouldn't
mean,
want to.
I was just talking to someone today and I was like, yeah, Canada is getting so bad. Like it's so socialist that it's borderline communist.
Yeah.
And it's just like when we travel from the US, which I mean, we've got our own problems over here, but back to Canada, even the censorship on YouTube, like
Yeah, I
all
know.
of
It's
the
crazy.
different platforms that I follow on YouTube, like we can't get those videos in Canada. Like Canada is the censorship is sure, we'll give you free healthcare and all the great things, but we're going to take away your freedoms. So
Yeah,
it's
and
like,
then tax you 60% of your income anyway. And that's
well,
the problem.
Ontario, yeah.
Yeah, we're definitely shadow banned to some extent on YouTube. It's weird, things tracked and then other things don't, and you can definitely tell that they're trying to play with the algorithm and not allow, especially shows like mine where we're pretty controversial about some of the stuff we talk about, and not letting those voices actually reach people so they can actually hear what is going on, especially in a country like Canada. Like I'm very much against communism and stuff, and I've read deeply into it. So I've felt these dark presence when I've been on mushrooms. I felt them in waking life around me, and especially on mushrooms, I've stared through the fractals, they call them, and I swear that I've seen entities looking back at me, and I've kind of shooed them away, like get out of my space. And because I think that I mess around with the Ouija board and occult practices like that, I think that I maybe attracted things. A Ouija board once told me that I have 9 spirits attached to me, some evil, some good, and so I hope that there have been eradicated now since I've done mushrooms. But it is pretty interesting because I have always been fascinated by the reptilian aspect of things. It seems like the dots connect with what kind of planet we're living on, why there's war and poverty and death and this chaos and the medical tyranny. So have you had experiences tapping into that side, the darker side, and what was it like?
Oh yeah. I mean, especially when I first started remote viewing and I was very just anti-establishment and just I mean, my entire life was consumed by the dark side and really just understanding it. But as you know, the more that you look into a phenomenon, the more it looks back. So
Yes.
that's really what started happening. A lot of entities, a lot of dark spirits, entity attachments, and then of course the reptilian stuff. So I'll give you one pretty crazy story. So I called them dinosaur people
Yeah, yeah.
because I didn't have a name for them. Like I just saw who they were and then I didn't have a name for them. Actually, I
Scary.
have 2 crazy stories. So back when I was a kid, you used to go into the bathroom and like turn off all the lights and say Bloody Mary 3 times.
Yeah,
And
we
like
used
that
to
was
do
like a
that.
scary thing. So anyway, so I did that. I was probably like maybe 7 or 8. And I was with a friend and it was only me that went into the bathroom and did that and in the mirror showed up this dinosaur looking man, like this full-on reptilian being in the mirror. I didn't know what it was at the time. I
Weird.
didn't even call it a dinosaur thing. I drew it, and when I was drawing it, I wish I still had the picture, but I remember I put little like rectangles and squares all over his face, and I didn't realize back then, but I mean that's sort of the
Scales.
the scales, right, of
Mhm.
the reptilian. So that was one story. So in a sense, they've sort of always been around,
Yeah.
I guess.
Mhm.
But then when I was around 18 and I was like, oh my goodness, this is a real thing. And the one thing that I set an intention for was I want to see one in person. I'm like, okay, great. Like remote viewing and seeing them and you know what I mean? Like, and seeing sort of through the veil, like that's all great, but I want to have a full experience with it. So I ended up going to McMaster University in Hamilton, right?
Mhm.
And I was busing back and forth from my student housing into the school. And this was like prime time when I was just really experiencing all of that. And I set my intention that I wanted to really encounter one. So I'm sitting on this bus, and it was the weirdest thing. There is this woman who is sitting across from me, okay, on this public bus. And she is dressed like she is straight out of the 1940s, like this, like pastel pink, full, like a skirt and like almost like a suit jacket outfit with gloves, and then these shoes. And I'm looking at this woman thinking that she is so odd. And as she's moving in this very, just very specific, almost like robotic way. And I'm like, okay. So on this bus at like 6 in the morning, I close my eyes and I tap in. I'm like, what's going on, right? Like
Yeah.
who is there something weird happening? And I saw this giant, basically reptilian being behind her. And so I said, well, I'm just going to go ahead and give her some white light, right? So
Mhm.
I'm sitting across from her and I start sending her like unconditional love, like right from my heart space. I shit you not. She starts reacting, like physically reacting. She presses back in her seat. Her
Weird.
face is all contorted, and she starts like doing this weird like hand thing, like this repetitive, like it was so erratic. Everyone else on the bus starts looking at her,
It's
and
it's
I'm
it's
just
Hamilton. They're like all crackhead, right?
right. And no, but even her outfit, like crackheads look a certain way, but
I
her
know.
outfit was just like, who is this woman? What's going on? And I wasn't like super tuned into my own abilities, so I don't
Yeah.
even know if I was able to push this thing off or cut cords. And also it was a bus ride, so it didn't last forever.
Yeah.
And then I just got out of there, you know. But that was just such a very sort of physical encounter. That wasn't the only one. I actually ended up dating a reptilian shapeshifter. Um, I
That's
think
wild.
that yes, I think
Male
that they
or
tried.
female?
It was a male. Like I've
Mhm.
only ever been with males until I met my wife, but
Yeah,
um, yeah, and so I think that they tried to target me, but and this was before I was online,
I've heard
but
stories.
I think that they tried to target me, and specifically they tried all these different things. They like entities would hop through, say, roommates and other people to attack me. Like it's just really fucked up things in that period of time, and none of it would work. Like I would always call it out, like you know, you're not my roommate, you're an entity attachment. Like
Yeah, yeah.
you're not going to phase me. The second that it came through a relationship, a romantic partner, like I let it in. And
Mhm.
I won't go into all the details. At the end, I finally saw his face shapeshift, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is what this was." Like sort of the gaslighting, the manipulation, the lies was just incredible. But one of the very interesting things was he would essentially like consume my power or my energy through sex and orgasm, which I
Yeah,
didn't realize at the time was like totally a reptilian thing.
yeah.
But then on top of that, he would, this is going to sound weird, but whatever, he would try and like consume, like, okay, he didn't like eat my flesh or anything, but like
Yeah.
he would like lick my armpits or like pluck my eyebrow hair and eat
Sweet.
the ends. Yeah, yeah, and it got even grosser and
Yeah,
weirder
yeah.
than that. But yeah, and so that was like a whole year of. I mean, they were also able, like he was able to read minds. He was able to implant false past life memories. So even though the reptilians, like they are at a lower vibration,
Mhm.
they have some very interesting abilities of their own.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, like, I just had Chris from Forbidden Knowledge News. He's got a pretty big show and an interesting guy. And he swears that when he was on a mushroom trip, because he's used psychedelics to try to tap into those realms, his ex-girlfriend shapeshifted in front of him, and and then he ran to the washroom and stuff. It's a whole long story. And he's throwing up like black stuff, and then after that, she was never the same. And I've heard experiences like this too
Mhm.
with them, and I started reading into this. We did a whole episode about the reptilians a couple years ago, like a deep dive into it, and I found obscure information that I didn't think people knew, especially about like the sexual side of things and how they do consume that type of energy. And I feel like I've felt it in my life where people can feel almost like this godly presence when they're in an orgasm or having sex and stuff, especially under the influences of alcohol and stuff like that. And I've read that they can even tap into your dreams. And I've told the story. I had a weird wet dream when I was younger about Shania Twain, and I'm convinced that something tapped into my head, and because I've heard they use celebrities and stuff like that, specifically more with females, and implant these images in their head, but they're actually taking advantage of you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've said it for a while now that the orgasm energy is really a key to connecting to source frequency, to that God frequency.
Mhm.
And this is why there's a lot of like trafficking and porn
Yeah,
and
yeah,
SA, you know what I mean, that
yeah.
goes out, that's out there because they're trying to manipulate that connection that we could potentially have into something that's lower and darker and all of that. So
And you can
I
see
also
where our
think that
society's heading.
yeah, and if you think about, like, even things like practices like tantra, right, is just it doesn't have to be necessarily sexual, and then onking that frequency, I think that that's how we naturally, live for very long periods of time, is being able to tap into that consciously.
It is interesting because I feel like everyone that knows what that's like could understand that. Like everyone, I feel like has kind of felt this experience, and I'm sure that more women than you probably have experienced these weird, especially male aggressive energies that don't even
Mhm.
feel like necessarily human. And that's why I find it interesting because I think I heard you talk about this. About the idea of like, a lot of things about World War II are coming to the forefront about what was really going on. What like, a lot of people didn't know anything about the book burnings and what they were actually doing. And so I have this belief that and I feel like I've heard you say this, it got hijacked originally, that the National Socialist Party was trying to actually do something good for their people. And then it got hijacked by some domineering force. And I feel like, and I've read a lot into history, and I think that the majority of things that we're being told is a lie. So I'd like to like kind of know if you've ever tapped into any of the history of World War One and Two, and what you kind of think was the main objective. I know there's all these different, but at least from the astral point of what they were trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's where things get really messy.
Mhm.
There's a lot of activity behind the scenes,
Yeah.
right? So there is an intention and a purpose for everything. One of the things that I've been very curious about, but because there are so many forces and so many different agendas and so many different things playing out,
Mhm.
one of the things that I've always been curious about is what's up with sort of this like, you know, the Aryan race and then
Mhm.
the Nordics, right? Or the Pleiadians, and then also like the Jewish people. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
what all of this like deep seated, um, like, what is it called? Anti-Semitism or
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, like, I don't know
Yeah.
where all of that comes from because it's interesting with the whole QAnon movement, there's so many things that I've channeled, that I
Yeah.
personally, because I do not take in any external information. So everything I know, I get straight from the source, straight from, remote viewing. But then it's like it takes a really dark turn,
It
you
does.
know? And I just haven't been able to fully figure out all of those pieces. So I can't really speak to in certainty
Mhm.
anything about World War One or two. I just haven't been able to clearly take a look at the intentions behind the scenes.
Yeah, yeah, and I was just pointing it out because it is an interesting time that forever will change our history and stuff like that, and the projection of where the world went. And there would be people that would say that some of the stuff is justified, not the killings or any of the murder, because like that's not, I think, what people are talking about. It's the idea that I do think that there is some people at work, whether they believe in Judaism or not, that want to fulfill the prophecies of their religion and stuff like that. And you see this going on now with the current war that is ramping up. And it is interesting to see that the motivations of people and who funds this and funds that and what their names are. And then you start to look into that. So it was just interesting because I thought maybe it was someone else, but I thought I heard you kind of talking about how I believe that some of this stuff has been hijacked. Originally, people maybe start off as good and then they kind of get these things tap into it. And like the Nazis were like talking to the Vril, supposedly, which were a Palladian looking race of beings, blonde hair, blue eye, that obviously may have taken hold of that whole ideology and movement. So there's a lot of things that I think that like are at play, as you said, and that most people just want to stay in the road that they know, and they're scared to venture off of the road. Have been scared that their whole life might be a lie. A lot of the things they were taught and learned about might be fiction, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really scary for most people. And that's why in so many ways I'm like, I can't wait for real global disclosure to happen. But then part of me is like, look, global disclosure has already happened. Like, look at all of the CIA documents that have been
Yeah.
released. Like, not just like, shared underground, right? For all the people like us who are interested, but like
Yeah.
actually declassified. It's all there. I mean, it's crazy. Someone years ago sent me, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, sent me a declassified CIA document of a military remote viewer who remote viewed into a giant mothership and said, oh, this is the inside of the Galactic Federation mothership. And he drew this very crude picture. And I'm like, wow, is that all you got? Like, as far as detail?
Yeah.
But how crazy is it that, yes, all of this stuff is out there. And yet, if you choose not to look at it, then it doesn't exist for you. So it doesn't matter how obvious, how apparent, or how much, say, the government, right, discloses. It really does come down to the people and how open or how programmed they are.
Well, it's interesting because I started looking into the Galactic Federation when I was like 16 or 17. And to be honest,
Wow.
I lost like hope of that there was essentially there is going to be this significant awakening. I've read a lot of David Wilcock's books. Some people don't like him, some people do. I find him interesting to say the least. And I was watching all these videos when YouTube was fun and you were able to put things out there about the Galactic Federation. And then I read into it more, and then I know that you, I suppose, we were in contact with them, and I would like to know what you think about some of this stuff, because like that's why I was excited to talk to you, because I was super into like aliens and people and interdimensional beings, and wanted to, and I felt like I was different, and I felt like I was talking to them in my head when I was a teenager. I felt this like, and I used to smoke cigarettes and stuff. I'd be outside staring at the sky all the time. And then I've created a song. It's called Alien Races, where I'm in the point of view of a gray, then a reptilian. I changed my voice throughout the song. And at the end, I'm a Palladian trying to wake humanity up. And I've always been really fascinated by this stuff. And I've as I've gotten older and nepotism sets in, I start to lose my hope of that there is ultimately a benevolent force, because then you start to think cynical. You start to think like, oh, maybe like we're just doomed to repeat this process and live in this reincarnation slavery.
Yeah. Okay. So, first of all, it's so cool that you were into that at such a young age. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that aliens like existed until I was abducted, and then I didn't even understand that there was an organization of good ones until I was contacted, and they're like, "Yeah, we're the Galactic Federation of Light." I'm like, "Okay, cool." Like, it's just crazy how other people are all talking about the same thing, and we're all getting it at different times, without any sort of influence. So that's just so cool that you were into that back then. But one of the biggest criticisms that I get a lot, or I hear a lot, is, well, what if the Galactic Federation is corrupt, or what if they're dark and evil, and what if
That's why I
you're
heard
being
demons.
basically
When you're talking to
yeah,
demons,
well, I
I like
mean,
that. A
when
lot of
you're
people
talking
say
to a
that.
religious person, all aliens are demons, and it's like,
100%. Yes.
it's fine. Like, you know what I mean? Like, those people aren't really even like close to this world
Yes,
that we're
I
in.
agree.
But sort of my response to, is the Galactic Federation corrupt? I mean, in so many ways, like, corruption can happen everywhere, and they're maybe in a different dimension or a different place than us, and they're not perfect. It happens. The way that I discern, because I've had so much experience with entities and attachments and reptilians and darkness, I know what unconditional love feels like. So anytime I'm interacting with an interdimensional being
You would
or
feel
a
it.
spirit guide, I feel it. And if I'm unsure, I'm like, okay, well, show me, like send me unconditional love. And lower vibrational beings just simply can't do that. So one of the really interesting experiences I had within discernment right at the beginning of exploring all of this was because I'm clairvoyant, so I can see, like, that's sort of my main thing, is I can see visuals and stuff. And so I was channeling, and there was this like beautiful billowing angel that came to me. Like, I can't even describe, like, huge, like billowing dress and just like floating in this non-existent wind, pure white, beautiful face, long hair, and this voice like, hello Elizabeth, like I have a message for you. And I'm like, wow, like what a picture of an angel, like truly. But something was off, and you know what it was? It was the eyes. There was something off in this angel's eyes. So I said, who are you really? She said, oh, I'm this angel from the 11th dimension, and I have a message for you. Okay, yeah, okay. No, I'm really not feeling it. Like, show me unconditional love. Could not show me unconditional love. So then I'm like, who are you really? I shit you not, the grossest entity with dark black, sharp teeth peers from behind this. Now all of a sudden it's almost like a cardboard cutout of this beautiful billowing angel, and then starts to attack me. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, so for me, it's not discernment gets to the point where you have to experience the dark in order to understand what the light is, and vice versa. And my whole thing with the Galactic Federation and corruption is, look, if the Galactic Federation are actually the bad guys, then who are the good guys? Because ultimately we exist in a binary universe, which means that there's going to be high vibration and low vibration. So great, we can't just say it's all just low vibration and like bad shit,
Yeah.
So so you have to, like, I'm a very curious person. I'm very skeptical, and in so many ways, like, I'm a realist, right? And I think when I first began, I was so naive to say, oh, this eighth dimensional being must know more or be better or know, you know what I mean, than I do. And I think we're on planet Earth because we are master beings. We are on planet Earth because we have been through so many different dimensions and lifetimes, and we have a lot of knowledge. So we have to understand too that we do have the power to change things here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I believe that I'm going to have a positive experience with one of these entities. Like the shadow people thing that I've just said numerous times. The fans know the story, but like what I felt was like incredible fear beyond anything I can imagine. And I would open my eyes, and I got back from Cuba. My friend got left there because he got drunk, and I was only 19, and so he got left. Before he left, he was screaming "fuck Castro, fuck Cuba," and I was like, great. So like when I got home, my wife now, like 13 years later, whatever, she was there, surprised me, and then I was laying in bed, and essentially I kept thinking about my buddy Mike and him being in Cuba, and I was feeling these low vibrational energies. I was drinking all week, and then I wasn't drinking at all, right? So I was completely sober, and so I was trying to deal with like these thoughts of him being there, and then I saw like these. I was looking into astral projection. I was aware of David Icke and stuff like that, so I kind of knew what these things could be. But I would open my eyes and I would see like literally like 6-7 shadow creatures looking down at me, and then I had to like she didn't know what was going on with me. She had no idea. Couldn't see it, couldn't understand it, and I kept having sleep paralysis where I had to like really rip my body out of it. And I got up and I looked towards my door and like walking to the washroom, and then I saw this like tall ass figure, I don't know, like 7 foot, 6.5 foot, and he looked down at me. It looked like, if you've ever seen the movie Insidious where that thing's like on the wall, it kind of looked like that. And then I went into the washer, I looked at myself in the mirror, and I was like, what the fuck's going on with you? What are these things? So I felt that darkness, and I've felt positive energy from humans. But I've always been fascinated by the idea of like the Palladians and some of these more positive entities, because I feel like there's definitely, I've heard that there's reptilians and stuff like that masquerading as Palladians or the Nordic races, and they use that to take advantage of us and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. There's absolutely no way that a reptilian shapeshifting into a Pleiadian body, which is absolutely possible,
Mhm.
can send you the amount of unconditional love, right? That pure source frequency. In order for them to exist, they have to feed off of other people's
Yeah.
source frequency, because they're at such a low vibration that they can't get that themselves, right? So that's the life force energy. That's the whole adrenochrome conspiracy,
Yeah.
is that they're feeding off of our life force, which is fascinating. But I'll give you a story that just happened. I mean, it's funny because in my life, it's like every day there's something weird that goes on. But a couple months ago, we had a nanny for our son, and there was a bunch of stuff happening with her, like boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, and he got into like some pretty serious drugs. And so
Mhm.
she's kind of like telling us about that like all week. It was like going on, and like, I would like sage her and like kind of help clear her energy. And she was a very high vibrational, person. And so the one day she comes in, and she was like with our son, and she puts him down for a nap, and he starts screaming like I've never heard before, like just terrified. And every time we went close to the crib, he would scream. And so when I checked into it, there was an entity that attacked him. And I was really curious why there was an entity in our house, because like I keep that shit on lockdown. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially given what I do. Like I'm very hypersensitive, and I do a lot of clearings. And so then I basically detached this thing from his room or his crib or him or whatever. So I get rid of it, and I clear the energy, and then he ends up going down for a nap. And then later that night, my wife goes downstairs to get some water, and she's walking up the stairs, and she screams like I've never heard her scream before. I'm like, what?
Mhm.
And she runs into the bedroom. I'm like, what's going on? Are you okay? And she's like, there was something behind me. It was following me. There was something that was following me on the stairs behind me. And I'm like, what? And so I look into it. And once again, it's the same entity. And I'm like, oh, duh. I removed it from our son, but I didn't kick it out of the house. So this thing was just wandering around the house. And when I took a look at it, it was an entity that was attached to her ex-boyfriend that got attached to her because she was light. So it was feeding off of her light. And then it hopped from her to our son. And then I cut that cord from it to our son. And then it was just free range wandering around the house. And then it was trying to attach to my wife. So finally, what I did was I opened up a white light portal. And this is what I do. I'm like, shit or get off the pot. You're crossing over, or you can't be here. Like you can exist, but like not here,
Yeah.
or you're crossing over into the light. And so when you present either a reptilian or a dark entity with pure unconditional love or source, or that portal, that white light portal, it has a choice, right? It can cross over. And it did. This one did. And the way that I see it is sort of that tall, dark, entity, scary looking thing.
Yeah.
If it gets close to that light, it's almost like it bursts into a million pieces, and there's all
Mhm.
these like little tiny fractals of darkness that just sort of explode, and then that's it transmuting into a higher frequency. And what I've realized with a lot of mediumship and crossing over spirits, and doing work at like graveyards and other sort of spookier places, all an entity, a dark entity or a lost spirit, all they really need is to be heard. So a lot of reptilians are very adverse to crossing over unless they just don't like their life. So
Mhm.
they're like, oh yeah, we know about the light, and like we choose the dark. But a lot of entities and a lot of spirits they're just lost or angry, and they don't know why. And the second you give them that option, or you just listen to their story, they're very willing to move on, which is nice.
That's what's interesting, because like I give you kudos, because sometimes I don't know, especially as a male, how to like open up that unconditional love towards especially things that I may not like,
Yeah.
especially what's going on with the country and the government. Like I couldn't imagine trying to project unconditional love at someone like Trudeau or any of these politicians, because I don't play sides. I literally hate every single politician. I think that they're parasitic leeches. And I was going to ask you
Yeah.
about that, the idea of like do you think that some of these darker entities are like kind of like parasites, where they're not that intelligent, but they know that they need to focus on consuming some sort of energy, either darker energy or lighter energy. Yeah,
Yep,
because it doesn't seem like they're
absolutely.
very smart.
So there's a wide range, right? There are spirits, like ghosts and spirits, like humans that just sort of got like caught in between and they're just wandering around, and like that's one part of it, right? And then there's like super intelligent dark entities. They're usually the bigger ones. Like they're
Mhm.
usually the big, the 7, 8, 9, 10 foot tall ones. And they are definitely more intelligent and they know what they're doing. But when you do confront them, they are stuck, they are lost, they are fucking miserable. And then
Mhm.
there's like small entities that are super common. Like this is going to sound really terrible, but there's certain people, especially when I'm out in public, especially when I'm in like a big city, that I
Yeah, yeah.
just won't make eye contact with because there's little tiny entities surrounding them. Typically people who drink often or on drugs, or
Mhm.
unfortunately homeless people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of entities around them, and those are the parasites. Those are the sort of the little leeches,
Mhm.
and they're super easy to cross over or just get rid of because they are very common. They're not very intelligent, and you're like, okay, like it's like shining light into a crack of there's like bugs and they like all like
Yeah.
scatter, right? It's like that sort of vibe. So
It kind of makes
yeah.
sense because like
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time in my life using alcohol to like cope with the stuff I was going through. I got arrested when I was younger. I was doing stupid things, right?
Mhm.
I kind of went down a very dark path in my teenage years, and I knew about all this stuff. Like, and I was researching into like everything, like the New World Order and the
Yeah.
Illuminati and all, and it almost drove me to that point. And 2012
Yeah.
hit, and my co-host can tell you this. I was going crazy. I didn't think anything mattered. I thought we were going towards either this awakening or this descending into something bad. So I've always used alcohol in some sort of way. I still drink once in a while. Like I'm having a little bit of this it's non-dairy, this weird milk thing. I thought it was fun with a little skull glass. But it's strange brew. So we started off like drinking on the show, talking about conspiracies, true
Yeah.
crime, all the
Yeah.
weird, strange things going on. I've definitely felt like you can tap into stuff with alcohol, though. There's something there, probably more low frequency beings, but I've definitely felt them, whatever they are.
So I will say too, like one of the things that I've
Spirit.
sort of come to realize, especially in being in that dark conspiracy agenda based world, and then also going to so the light side or whatever, and seeing both, I'm really neutral, or at least I try and stay neutral, like right in the middle. And one of the things that I teach is like full mastery is to be aware of both light and dark, but
Yeah.
not to be adverse or attached to either. And so I bring it up in a lecture when I talk about this, that, a beer, like I enjoy a Guinness, right? Every
Yeah,
once in
yeah.
a
That's a
while,
good
like
one.
Guinness is my vibe, right?
Yeah.
So you have a glass of alcohol. Now, naturally, at its atomic state, alcohol is in a lower vibration,
Yeah.
but
100%.
we have the ability to raise the vibration of anything. And this is why I'm an intuitive eater. When I have a steak or a piece of salmon, like
Mhm.
it's at a low vibration because yeah, it is flesh, it is meat, it has
Mhm.
been killed, and that's the trauma that's sitting there. But through gratitude, through appreciation, we can raise the vibration. So it's almost like, you take something like a glass of beer that's
Mhm.
naturally at a low vibration, and then you raise the vibration by appreciating it, by
Yeah, it
being
is.
grateful,
There is
right?
fun drunks out there. There's the people that like you see change into something evil where it connects to something in their head. There's also people
Yep.
where I try to enjoy myself if I'm going to partake, and I try to have a fun time and be positive and listen to music and dance. And
Yeah.
as weird as it is, I love the dance. And I love music. That's why I create music. I've always loved music,
Mhm.
and so I've always used it. And it's interesting that I think we can do the same thing. It can lift people up and help them, but also it can deteriorate a lot of people. And that's why mushrooms is definitely a different beast. I always feel incredible after and really good, but it's also there's times throughout a trip where you can definitely feel like there's something around you. Or I people thought I was crazy. I was doing mushrooms, then watching movies out back with my wife on the projector, and I watched like American Werewolf in London, really high on mushrooms. I felt like this dome around me, and I felt like there was things like sitting beside me and behind me, and I didn't know what they were, good or bad. And we were talking about the history of the land, and maybe the
Mm,
the indigenous riding through this land before
yeah.
it was built into a town and all that stuff, right? So I like tapping into that side of things. I there's a couple of questions because I know you're limited on time. What do you
Yeah.
think about the Greys? Okay, because that's something that's always fascinated me. We did like a 2 hour deep dive in them. In my idea of what I think they are, I think there's two different versions. Ones that are naturally born or whatever you want to say or create, but from what I've heard, that they're like essentially like humanoid androids, like they're animatronic. They're not really like of they're of flesh but not of what we would consider, and they're almost like robotic, and they are tools of the reptilians, almost like gloves into a glass container to like manipulate like something that's radiated or something.
Yeah. So I one of my most predominant lifetimes in the past was a gray
Interesting.
lifetime. So I've really explored them. The first thing that I would want to mention is that we don't realize that there are tens of thousands, if not millions, of different gray species. So if a
Mhm.
human being were to be abducted by any one of these tens of thousands of species, which means billions and billions
Yeah,
and billions or trillions of different grays, we would be like, oh yeah, that looks like a gray alien. But their head is different, their eyes are different, their height is different, their
the
bodies are
tall
different
whites.
because
Yeah.
it's a completely different species.
Mhm.
There's tall white grays. I mean, it's so infinite. So we have to realize that when it comes down to the grays, there's so many different species that just aren't talked about. Yes, I call them the
Interesting.
good grays and the bad grays, just to
Mhm.
be super plain. The good ones work with the Galactic Federation. For sure. They're less emotional, they're way more logical and analytical, and the good ones, at least, are very well versed in genetic manipulation. And
Mhm.
this is why they're working with the Galactic Federation to be like, let us share our knowledge on genetic manipulation. And they've made some mistakes along the way. They have cloned their own
Yeah. I'm sorry,
genetics.
guys, but you're scary looking.
Yeah, there's a lot of different beings that are not
Yeah.
pretty, right? Like the mantis, like they're fucking freaky.
They might
So,
think
but
I'm ugly, so it's fine.
yeah, absolutely. And so because they have cloned themselves so often, like they're dying off. And then this is why,
I
they're
heard
working
that.
with the Galactic Federation. Like they're like, we'll share our knowledge if you help us and vice versa. But they're good, they're kind-hearted, and they do believe in unity. I mean, the GFL
Mhm.
wouldn't work with them if they were not pure in that way. Then there's the bad grays, which once again, many different species
Yeah.
within each category. But the bad grays, like you mentioned, I call them biological robots.
Mhm.
So yeah, they're typically
Fascinating.
shorter and they're kind of soulless in that way.
Hive
Like
mind.
they're yeah, like a hive mind, but reptilians can come through and utilize them. I've also seen Anunnaki come through and utilize them as well to just sort of do their bidding or like fuck with humanity.
Mhm.
That sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, those grays give the other grays a bad rep, and so there's like Stephen Greer believes that all aliens are good, and
Yeah,
then
I
there's so
don't
many
think
other
that.
researchers that believe that all aliens are bad, and I'm
Bad,
like,
yeah.
how limited can you be to think that all aliens are good or all aliens are bad? Like if that's the core of someone's belief, then everything else they say or believe in, it there's no validity there. Like there's just, I can't listen to anything else you have to say because your core belief is that they're all good and they all love us. It's like absolutely not.
Yeah.
Or they're all bad. I mean, that's just not the universe we live in. So
Yeah.
yes, that's sort of my understanding of the grays, is that there's definitely two big subspecies, and they have very different agendas for planet Earth, some that are here to definitely help us and others that are not.
And that's what I've always hoped for. It is as hopeful it is to give it some hope, because I never found anything in religion, as much as I really wasn't religious. And I've talked to religious people on the show. I have a couple close friends. One's Jehovah and one's a Christian, same kind of thing, but different. And I have my own beliefs about things, and I try to express that to them and stuff like that, because I'm not a fan of religion, especially organized religion, right? And I think to live like whatever Jesus, whoever he was, because to live like him, I think is virtuous, to want to be like he was and care and love for people. And I hold anger and people could say hatred, but like I do hold anger in my heart for the stuff that is going on in the world. And because I'm a man, I think men need to fight and try to fight against the stuff like the New World Order and the coming agenda of communism in Canada. It is tough for me to find that light. But I do find it interesting of like, I want to kind of know what your interpretation is of where we came from. Because I've heard like Lyra and there was a big galactic war and we could have been kind of spread out in the universe, but at least the idea of humans, what we are. And we did a whole episode with the Anunnaki. Or do you believe that we come from, or we are creation? People think we're a bastard child of the Anunnaki and we're not connected to God. There's all these different theories about where we come from, who we are. So I'd like to hear what you think and what you've been able to find out at least.
Yeah. Okay. So very loaded question. Something I
sorry.
could talk about for hours. I
Yeah.
will just plant a seed and say, if people want to know more about what I've remote viewed, please go to my website.
Yeah.
A video off the top of my head is called The Prophecy Planet. And then another video that comes to my mind is How the Universe Works. And so those will sort of sum it up, but I will just summarize. So once again, I don't read any books. I don't watch documentaries. I don't know
Yeah.
who else is saying anything in this industry. This is what I've remote viewed from day one. And so essentially, way back in the day, the reptilians came here first. Okay.
I
And
heard
so
that.
they came here first from somewhere else. I don't know, I guess from their planet or whatever. Actually, I think they were like exiled or something. I don't know. It was like a punishment. Anyway, so they came
Alex
here.
Collier thinks that they don't even know where they come from.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So it because it was such a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so they came here first, and then there was the dinosaurs, and they were pretty much the dominant, most intelligent species on the planet for a very, very long time. Then all of a sudden, the Anunnaki come to this planet, and they're like, "Wow, this planet has all the resources we need, specifically gold." So they wanted to mine gold, and the reason why they wanted to mine gold, which is bizarre, it's like, why can't you, if you're that advanced, why can't you create it? I don't know. It's just weird, but anyway, so they came here to mine our gold, and the reptilians are like, whoa, like this is our planet. You can't just be here to mine our resources. And the Anunnaki are like, well, we're definitely at a higher level than you are. And so we're just going to take what we need, but we could work together. And so the Anunnaki start sort of employing the reptilians to help mine the gold. And the reptilians are like, no fucking way.
Is that the Ajiji of what people think the Ajiji is?
I believe so. Yeah. And then the Elohim, right? So there's different names, the giants, right, as well for the Anunnaki. So then the Anunnaki are like, okay, well, the reptilians aren't gonna work for us. So we're gonna have to create something that will work for us. And the Anunnaki have done this. Like, I call them the creator beings, because all of the very humanoid beings that we know very well, the Pleiadians, for example, the Syrians, were originally created by the Anunnaki. And the Anunnaki like basically create different species just to do their bidding, kind of as a slave species. And then they're like, okay, cool, bye, like, see ya. Like, they don't care. And then that species goes on and develops and advances. So they did that. They basically took, like, I guess the apes or the chimpanzees or whatever that we're related to, and they spliced their DNA with them, did a little mixing, and then they were here. We were mining the gold. We were basically the slaves for a very long time, like a couple of generations. They kept having to make humans, and so we weren't able to reproduce because they wanted to keep our population under control. And then finally, they're like, this is way too much work. We're going to let them reproduce, and this is where we got out of hand. The reptilians were essentially like our slave masters, or I called them the managers, is what I saw. And then what happened is, the Anunnaki left. They got what they needed. The reptilians were still here. And then all of these other species started to get attracted to our planet and splice their DNA with our DNA. The Greys, the Angels, the Pleiadians. And then that's what created us as a hybrid being. So I believe we have upwards of 20 to 25 different species within us, all from different places and different times in history. And then finally, eventually, it was the Galactic Federation that came to the planet Earth and said, okay, reptilians, like, you can no longer interfere with humans anymore. Like, they have to develop and move on their own. And the reptilians are like, we're not leaving. This is our planet. This planet belongs to us. They came here after. And so the GFL was like, all right, you can be here as long as you're not seen. Okay. So it's this not being seen, which is in the contract that they agreed upon. So the reptilians were forced underground. And while they were underground, brooding, thinking, why are the humans get to be out and about and we're forced underground and we can't involve ourselves? And then that's when they started developing that shape-shifting technology. And they do that in a variety of different ways. So technically, they're still abiding by this contract with the Galactic Federation saying, well, I mean, we're not being seen. And if we influence humanity to create a reality that we want without making those choices for them, then we're not necessarily infringing upon the law of non-intervention. So they get to fucking manipulate the whole system. If they're like,
That's
okay,
what I heard.
humans,
David Icke talks about that, or David Wilcock,
okay,
where it's the karmatic agreement where they're able to use our consent. So they show like the
mhm.
WEF shows us all this stuff. We're gonna do
Yep.
this. We're gonna make you own nothing, and then if we just go along with it,
Exactly. Or they basically put out, now it's entertainment. They put out all these movies,
yeah,
the predictive programming, they plant those seeds, and then humanity ends up watching the programming and creates that through our own manifestation and projection.
which is
So
scary.
I keep having to remind people, like, we have the numbers, we have the power, we have the
Yep.
connection to source. Not only that, but we have the DNA. Like, come on, we are part Anunnaki, we are part Pleiadian. The reptilians are just reptilian. Like, we
Mhm.
are a master race, and we need to start owning that, taking full responsibility of the reality that we're creating and fucking doing something about it.
Yeah, and I agree. I just because I know you're running out of time. Do you believe that there's or the reptilians from Draco Socanus, which is in the Orion's Belt? Because people believe that there's the ones that were already here that live in the cavern systems, underground, and in probably numerous dumbs bases, right? But do you believe that there is? Because people are saying that the hierarchy of royalty and all that stuff does come from the reptilians.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So actually, just like a month ago, I ended up meeting a what is it, alpha draconian. He said he was
Yeah,
an alpha draconian and
interesting. Yeah,
was interested. So they all look the same, but yeah, definitely, like, talk about
Or-
royalty, right? Like, so yeah, so some of them have wings and some of them have
Yep.
tails, which on planet Earth, the ones that I typically see, they don't have tails and they don't have wings, but they are quite large and scary.
Yeah.
But the ones off planet I've seen, once again, they almost look like dragons, right, with the wings and the tails. So there's so many different species of reptilian as well, but I refer to the ones here as like Earth reptilians.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me because that's like probably one of my favorite subjects of all time. Just because it is so fascinating and it makes sense, and the iconography throughout history, and the snake eating its own tail, and like the Chinese
Yep.
worship dragons, and there's so many things. Like I'm reading David Icke's book right now, The Children of the Matrix. It's huge. All of his books are, and it's like the most extensive research into reptilians, and it is interesting. It's hard. Sometimes it's hard to get through because there's the way he writes and stuff like that. So I'm hoping eventually to get him on a show. I've talked with them and stuff like that, but there's this subject has always been my favorite, and I've kind of tried to direct it. I was more like interested now about real history, about what's going on our planet, the
Mm-hmm.
physical aspects of who is in control, why they're in control, why were there these wars, what was going on, who was financing them. But this stuff has always been my home, and like I said, I've always had weird experiences and feelings when I've been researching this stuff, like that I was connected. I don't know. I always felt I was special. It sounds so weird. I said this to there's another guy that came on the show that channels the Melchizedek, some ancient beings, and she supposedly opens portals and is able to like send spirits away and kind of do some of the aspects of what you're kind of doing and in channeling. And I do believe him. He's a pretty genuine guy. He's from Britain. He lives in the States now, and I told him, that I always felt like this weird calling, that something out there was connected to me and that I was being watched. Like that's how I always felt, like something was watching over me. And then I slowly, as I got older, I lost that kind of, I would say, connection or hope and drive for that aspect of it. And I started speaking politically out to try to wake people up. I got a huge following on TikTok. I got a big one on Instagram. Then they took away they banned me from all the platforms. When I was just trying to like give people information about accurate history that I believe is accurate, or what's going on with the government in just simple terms. And I feel like that's why I want to bring you on the show too, is because I want to get back to my home where I feel like I'm connected to. instead of, because I'm very angry about the world right now.
Yeah, I can tell you're angry about the world. So I would definitely call you a star seed, right? I mean, you're explaining all of the symptoms of a star seed, and I have many videos on star seeds. If people are curious on, who, what is that, and am I one? And so I just want to mention, just sort of at the last couple minutes here.
Yeah,
So I used to be where you're at, and I'm sure that you're probably less angry than you were before,
yes,
hopefully.
yeah.
But when we can get to a place of loving the dark side, I know it sounds really twisted and messed up, but loving them in an unconditional way from the perspective that we do live in a binary system, and everyone who is dark and corrupt and evil and taking advantage of us and manipulating us, if we can come at it from the place that they're actually needed as well, and they wouldn't exist here if they weren't a part of our contracts. And so they're helping us explore the dark side of
I
this
agree.
universe, which then helps us understand and connect with the light, right? I mean, dark doesn't exist without the light, and the light doesn't
I
exist
agree.
without the dark. So when you're able to step away from the corruption and from the anger that you feel within the corruption,
Mhm.
and you're able to observe both the light and the dark in a grateful way, and understanding that both are needed in this universe, then and only then can you truly be neutral. Then and only then can you truly come at life from the most objective place. And that's what I believe full mastery is not being scared of the dark and not attaching yourself to the light, but understanding that both are just pieces of the puzzle, and source energy, or that oneness, includes and incorporates both. And in that way, you never give your power away to the dark, because that's what they want. If you're pissed off at all of the
Yeah,
corruption in the
100%.
world, then you're feeding it.
Yeah,
Right. So just to kind of put things in perspective, like, I
yeah.
was right where you were, and I've been able to get out of that constant anger or fear place.
And it's funny because I know that too, which is the craziest thing, is I know all this stuff and I've looked into it and I understand that fear is a way to control and all that stuff. And there's just a part of me that sees all the stuff going on. Like I'm, I think the mass immigration stuff, there's a lot of stuff at play, especially in
Uh-huh.
Canada, that is causing this mass divide of too many different
Yeah.
cultures that don't know how to get along. It would be like reptilians hanging out with Palladians, and they don't even think the same. They don't eat the same food. And you see this stuff like starting to erode the society. And I've always preached and believed that we need to come together collectively. But obviously, there's things that I still see the physical world, and I see that I'm here now physically experiencing this stuff. And there's part of me that does believe that anger can be used as a tool to push towards things like a real revolution, not the ones that are backed by the Rothschilds and everything else is going on,
Mhm.
but real revolutions where people unite. But I've always been someone who really thinks that like a mass awakening is possible and could happen. And I do think that the more that they keep pushing humanity, the more that it will
Yep.
collectively bring us together and fulfill
Yep.
this awakening that I think we're supposed to have, that I think it's supposed to happen.
Yeah. I always say you got to break down to break through, and that's where we're at right now.
Awesome. I really appreciate you coming on. Like, even in a couple months, I would love to have you come back on the show because there's so many questions I have. Like, I'm feeling pressure in my head and stuff right now. Because like I feel like I feel like I do this show, and I started out doing it with just my friends, especially my one buddy. It was just me and him having a couple of drinks. And then I started like, okay, I'm not going to have a guest on unless I actually want to talk to them. Because a lot of people every podcast out there does the same thing. They have a guest and they just bring just numerous people on with different opinions. And I'm like, I want to keep my thing at home with me and my friends talking about the strange stuff. But there's always people like you that I want to actually talk to, and I have this platform to do so. So I was like, I have to bring you on to have one of these conversations. And I would definitely love to have you back on at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been such a pleasure chatting about all this stuff, and I'm very hopeful for the future, and I hope that other people feel the same.
Yeah, I feel the same. So shout out again where people can find you so they know, and then we'll bring it to a close.
Yeah, so my main platform is YouTube, and I guess Instagram, but I'm pretty much everywhere else. Rumble, TikTok, all the
Yeah,
things.
Rumble's starting to build
But
up.
but if you really want a censorship and ad-free platform, basically I created my own like website that's essentially like the Netflix of EA. And
Nice.
what's great is I don't have to be a slave to any platform ever, because if I get banned on one, I've always got my website that's super encrypted and like super protected to fall back on. So yeah, just head on over to my website, watch a shit ton, just binge watch it all, and you will start to feel the DNA activations and shifts, because it is quite a world out there.
I'm definitely gonna tune in a little more, and everybody out there, you know where to find us and support us. Obviously on Patreon, buy merch, and then support my music at the Reptilian and all music platforms. You won't be able to hear it, but maybe I can say you sometime. But I'm gonna outro it with my alien racist song. It makes sense to do this after this episode. So everybody's watching, stay strange.
I have a problem with that, and so does half of the other of the galaxy. That's just the way they are. They're the biggest bully. Nobody can beat them up or wipe them out, so therefore they have no motivation to change.